Now, the problems in Nigeria's power sector seem to have become a difficult puzzle for government to solve. At the just concluded Nigeria Economic Summit, some participants called for the recapitalization of the sector. The idea is that government should increase their investment in the sector, scaling up ownership from 51% to 60% and divest to capable investors who have the financial muscle and expertise to run the businesses. Well, let's talk to one of the directors at EkoDisco, George Itomi, on some of these issues. Good morning, Mr. Itomi. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You had issues when I talked about the puzzle. Well, there's actually a puzzle. In any case, what I want to ask, it's 4 years since after the power sector privatization.
Sure.
What's your general appraisal of that sector? How has it fared?
Let me start with one correction. The government has actually 40%, not 49%, and it's 60% to the private investors. It's always good to get this very clear, because when we don't understand that, then you will be calling for essentially what's an expropriation of the assets of investors, which is not good for the overall economy. Now, on the subject of the journey so far in 4 years, I would say, like you correctly noted, it may appear like a puzzle, but we must confess that from the first time I recall speaking with you, we were looking at power generation at around about 2,800 megawatts. But in the last few weeks, months, following upgrading of most of the, and some of the financial decisions taken by the government, power generation has climbed slowly to about 7,000 megawatts. So that's a massive improvement from 2,800 to 7,000. And then on the transmission side, we still have challenges. Again, there's a lot of work on transmission to boost its wheeling ability. So far, I know around about 4,000 is consistent, but once you begin to go beyond that, it increases the strain on the transmission network. So from time to time, you have these outages. And it's important to know that, because the tendency is to blame the discos whenever there is no power. At times, it's a grid collapse that will cause it. Then on the distribution side, you talked about calling for recapitalization. Recapitalization will work if the basic complaint of the disco is taken care of, and that is that we do not have a cost-reflective regime, which was one of the planks upon which this privatization was done. It's like having a product that costs you 50 naira, but you are told don't sell it beyond 30. What immediately happens is that there's a gap. And because of the nature of electricity, it's a wasting asset. Once it's out there, you've got to push it out. That gap increases every day. And I think as we speak, it's close to 860 billion naira. So that's the gap they're talking about. And there is no efficiency, degree of efficiency that would make you return 100% to the market when in the first place you're not allowed to collect that. So yeah, recapitalization, but before you put the chicken before, as they call it, before you do the cart before the horse, you should look at going back to what it ought to be. Once you have a cost-reflective regime, then it's easy to then level the playing field, and then you now look for investors. No investor, no matter how deep their pockets are, will come under the present climate. We've made that representation to government, and I know they're beginning to look at it. Since 2012, when we had the last major tariff review, there has not been any under the MITO. The minor reviews that took place has not been implemented. It recommended adjustments for foreign exchange differentials, for inflation. Of course, you had the problems in the Niger Delta and all that. So those issues are there. And that's what MITO does. MITO tries to ensure that these distortions are taken care of. But because it ultimately ends in a tariff review, which in many cases it's on the upward trend, government tends to be a bit worried because of what they consider would be the backlash. So we consistently find ourselves in this chicken and egg situation. Do you raise tariffs before the services improve, or do you raise services before the tariff improve? But however you look at it, the kind of money we need to revamp the power sector as a whole is not available in this country. Even if you committed your entire national budget every year to power, you will never, you just crack the surface. So that investment is going to come from investment funds that are sitting and waiting to come into this environment, but are put off by the distortions, many of which, in my opinion, are man-made. So if we go, we can't rewrite the laws of economics. If you tell someone to come and invest in a loss-making business, they will not come for all the love they have for you. But if you level the playing field, then those investments will come. So to put it in summary, the discos are not against recapitalization and all that. We must follow naturally the processes provided for under company law. To the investors come in, they talk to you, but it's not as if those talks are not ongoing. So
you're advocating for an increase in electricity tariff?
I don't want to use the word increase so we don't get it wrong. You are looking for the right, correct tariffs, because the last increase, for example, the increase did not affect the residential. There are 4 grades of consumers, R1, R2. R2 are 1 and R2 are the people might call the masses. Their tariffs were frozen. The increase affected the R3 customers and the maximum demand customers. And so what we do in the industry, we use those strong ones to cross-subsidize those who cannot do it. So there is a formula. There is a formula for taking care of the concerns of the masses. So the tendency for an uprising to occur whenever you talk about tariff increase is wrong. You can do it in such a way, you can still take care of the people. What we want is give power to everybody who needs it, because power is going to change this economy around. Your vulcanizer, your welder, you just imagine if they had steady power with the boost to the economy. And at a time when they become financially able, you can then slowly adjust their tariff. So we must get it right. Tariff increase doesn't necessarily mean. In fact, some of the measures being taken by government now, I'm sure you know they announced recently eligible customers. They're going to declare eligible customers. They're looking for willing buyers, willing sellers. There are ways of sort of, I don't want to like to use the word bypass, but there are ways of getting around this issue of tariff increase. So that if you get a willing buyer and a willing seller, they can agree on their prices. And there are other discussions going on about that. So there are ingenious ways you can do it. The only concern I just have is that if you don't treat the entire sector holistically, you look at one end of the chain where you think there's a problem and you try and solve that problem, it will end up at another end. And right now it's the discos that are bearing the brunt of these distortions. Let me give you an example. Power for most of the thermal plants, the feedstock is gas. Now, the price of gas is a pass-through cost. So once the gas producers produce gas, they push it onto the discos. The discos push, by the way, it's priced in dollars. They push it on to the disco. The gencos push it onto the discos. But as I told you, discos cannot push it onto the customers because it's regulated. There's a cap. So what happens is that the discos carry these debts, that gap, on their books. And it increases every day. So it makes them look bad. Their banks will not touch them for new investments. They can't meet their CAPEX and OPEX obligations, metering being one of them, and all that. So we must then find a way of taking these distortions off their books. Once it's off their books, create some sort of fund. I mean, your last guest was talking about harsh business environment. This is what creates the harsh business environment. There are distortions. If you remove those distortions, then you have a level playing field. And then you can then apply the rules. Because right now, the objective of the entire privatization exercise is to get us to a point where we can actually enforce our contracts against one another. But you can't do that now because of the distortions. So we must take care of those distortions.
Now, recently, the government approved about 700 billion.
Yes, for the power.
That's for Genco?
For the, yes.
How has that actually helped?
It's helped in the sense that it's given an assurance to the gas suppliers that they will be, the Gencos will pay them, because that money is given to NBET, and NBET gives it to the Gencos who use it to pay for gas. So that deals with the supply side. But there is no corresponding cushion on the distribution side. That's what I'm saying. You must treat the entire value chain holistically. So what is now happening is that, that's why, by the way, generation has gone up, because they are being paid. Now, what I told you, one of the major distortions is the cost of the power. When it gets to us, because of the ceiling on tariffs, we have to bear that entire cost. So measures must be brought to bear. I don't know what language we can use for them, but that distortion must be taken off so that you create a level field. Everybody needs to be on the same page when it comes to power. And it does not matter what end of the value chain you find yourself, whether you are making policy, whether you are regulating, whether you're an industry participant. We all need to sing from the same hymn book so that it is easy for us to cross. And it's a Rubicon we can cross. Anybody who's directly involved will tell you, nearly 80% of problems are man-made, so we can deal with them.